Welcome to Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring in professionals, experience, and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. We believe wise investing starts with a plan. Your investments may have merit, relevance to a time and place, but this all depends on you, your objectives, and your goals. My name is Seth Cressman, and I'm here with Ben Brayshaw and John Ryder. We're all planners and partners with Brayshaw Financial Group. Good morning, guys.
Good morning, Seth.
Good morning, Seth.
I don't know why that always cracks me up. That's the best part of my morning, just hearing you guys say good morning.
I'm a funny guy, Seth. What can I say? Good morning, you're laughing already.
That's why you're on radio.
That's all I need. We are glad you're listening to Money on Tap. And if you're looking to sit down with an advisor and start making some of the right steps toward your financial goals, we welcome the opportunity to do that with you. And you can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. You can also find us at Facebook at Money on Tap or yourmoneyontap.com. And today we are going to take a look at something that we've talked about a lot, and we're gonna kind of get on some kind of a bit of a downward spiral here with some of the information that we're going to present. But
Seth,
I want to let you know,
depressing, a downward spiral.
There is a light at the end of the tunnel. We wouldn't do that to you folks. That's not our goal. But there's something called a pension, and we talk about this, building pensions and creating or generating ongoing income. And that pension piece is something that's come to light here, a critical light, especially in Oregon where I am. And we're going to highlight and talk about a couple of articles here and why we're bringing this to the forefront today, why we feel this is such an important topic to bring up.
Seth, we talk about this stuff every day when people come in and they bring in their 401k statements, and they'll talk about – it's interesting with pensions many times when people talk about a pension, they say, yeah, I have a pension, not quite sure what it is. They know they have the paperwork for it somewhere. I was just test driving a car this past weekend, and I was talking to the guy that was along with me on my drive in the car, and he says, I'm a firefighter. So he said he'd asked me what I did, and I told him. And he said, I'm a firefighter. And so the good thing for me is that I'm pretty much all set because I have a pension all in place for me when I retire. And I said, yeah, but. And as we were just kind of driving along, and I was trying to make sure not to go through red lights and not to go too fast and get a ticket, we were just talking about, I was talking to him actually about the show we had done before on pensions, and talked to him about how there's a lot of pensions out there that are underfunded. And, we're going to get a lot into some of those different states that are having some issues. But right now we're going to really focus on Oregon. And I think that's maybe a central focus for you, Seth, being that's where you're from. But tell me a little bit about that. What's going on out in Oregon?
Gosh, you tee me up so well, John, and I always want to go back to something that you've said. So I'm gonna sidetrack here. You're talking about the pension, a firefighter pension. I didn't realize that, at least in the state of Washington, that the volunteer firefighters, like after 25 years of service in the volunteer firefighting, they qualify for a pension too. And I don't know what that is, but I just thought that was fascinating. I was doing the math. I was like, I wouldn't mind going and doing a little volunteer firefighting. Of course, I'm sure it's a lot more involved than, showing up with a bucket every once in a while when I feel like it.
You guys all make fun of me in Rhode Island. I spent 3 or 4 years on the volunteer fire force there. And of course,
what was that? What was that like?
Actually a great time. But I will tell you this: I spent a lot more time like rolling up hoses and doing what I was told to do, as opposed to fighting fires. But we did have we had a lot of fires that went on. Most of them were we had medical emergencies where some drunk old lady would crash into a pole, and we had to use a jaws of life or that kind of thing. So we saw a lot of medical emergencies. We saw a lot of brush fires too. Kids would get out there and have a cigarette and drop it in the woods, and so all kinds of stuff. But no pension available for me.
No. Were they offering that though? Was that that's a state?
So.
No,
I don't think so.
So my friend's talking to me, and he served over 25 years, but apparently the last 3 months he wasn't doing a whole lot of service, and so he was 3 months shy of his pension, and he was going to go volunteer at a local, very very small fire department in Washington, and just he wasn't going to go for the 3 months to get the pension. He was going to at least commit a couple of years, but he's kind of in semi-retirement anyways, and he thought that might be something fun to do.
But here's one of the things we're seeing. We're seeing that people that have guaranteed, quote unquote, guaranteed pensions in place.
Right.
It's not necessarily all that they think it is, and it really depends upon where you're from. But Oregon right now is really facing a crisis. In fact, we were looking at an article, referencing an article actually just from a few days ago here on the 25th that talks about really the problem with the pension system. Right now in Oregon, Seth, they're saying that there's a $1.6 billion deficit. But it's mostly, one of the reasons for this deficit is really for a couple different things. One is they call it kind of like a kowtowing to public employee unions, and then government-run healthcare is also a concern as well.
So one of the things I think we need to address first and foremost is the pension concept, and we've done a show on that, and you know what, we probably should bring it up and kind of redo. Some of our I don't know what you want to call it, greatest hits, but I don't think we're there yet. No. But it was a really great show because it was a lot of fun for us too, because there was some history involved, and what is a pension, and why do we have this current pension system, and what are some of the problems that we're experiencing in this pension problem? Well, the pension, typically what people identify with is a guarantee to pay. You go to work for somebody, you put in so many years, and they've got a pension, right? And then at some point in time, there's different ways that they kind of break that out, but then you qualify for their pension, which is a guarantee to pay. And that's the mindset that most people have around a pension, is that I am guaranteed some kind of a payment, almost like, the Social Security system is our national form of a pension system. Like once you put in so many quarters of work, then, of earnings, then, you have a Social Security benefit there. So that's the idea, right? And so what has happened with the pension system, and specifically this article highlights in Oregon, is we have a lot of the public sector that is those are your teachers, those are your government employees, those are can be depending on how it's funded, firefighting or some of those utilities as well.
Please.
So. Yeah, exactly. So, after working and this pension being set up for some kind of a guaranteed return that they're expecting. So, employees are putting in so much, the taxpayers are putting in so much of this pension, and there's an expectation that there's going to be, a 7% return. Or so there's actuaries that are working on the back end of this, trying to figure and calculate an expectation off of that return that they should be able to fund basically those pensions and those payouts. And what they're getting is a very significant difference in what they thought they should have or could have and what they have. And that is a big deficit. And it's not just in Oregon, folks. This is nationally. But we're talking about, right here in the state of Oregon, what are we looking at?
It says, the article here talks about how there's some major costs and major deficits. In fact, it says this: the $365 million that schools will spend to bolster the pension fund for the next 2 years could have been spent to hire 2,000 new teachers, for example. So there's a $365 million deficit just with the pension fund alone, just for the school system alone. So, but it's a big problem when money runs out. That's a big problem for retirees, people that are expecting it. I was talking with Ben just about this before the show. We had a client that was recently assigned to us from another advisor. The advisor is no longer in the business, but this client was assigned to us. He's out in the state of Florida, and he had this life insurance policy that he had purchased from the former advisor, and he was finding that he was really having trouble making the payments. So we started talking more about that, talking about his budget and all that. And he said, you know what? He said, my pension has been cut back by 30%. And he said, this is a real problem for me because I have ongoing expenses that I have, everything from my mortgage to my taxes, to even medications, that type of thing. But he's really, really suffering and really not able to put in the amount that he needs to into his life insurance just to keep it going. And that's just a simple result as of his pension not paying out what it promised him to do.
Yeah, and John, that story is really scary because when you think about, he's an older gentleman.
He is, yeah,
and
over 80. Yeah,
yeah, and so he's living in an inflationary environment in his life, and his income is going down, and it's like a double whammy there for him financially, and that's killing him. And with Oregon, this is just one of many, many states dealing with this. I mean, I know we're going to focus right here on Oregon, but I just kind of want to bring that 30,000-foot view back in that, every state has a pension deficit, funding deficit. Every state. And
you were saying something about there's no state that actually has a balanced budget when it comes to
to the pensions.
Yeah.
So when you actually break that out, it's pretty scary, and we're going to get into some more of that detail. But I really, this article is amazing, and it's funny that they actually go into Obamacare, and that when Oregon accepted Obamacare's Medicaid expansion, they had 85% more than expected enrolled.
Of course, the cost went
It's
crazy
one
too. Yeah.
in Oregon. It's 1 out of 4 is the average. People are actually on the Medicaid program here.
Yeah, that's only added to this major problem. Major problem.
So, how do these people make up for that shortfall? Well, right now it's a big crisis out there. It's a big crisis for people as they're seeing their incomes dry up. And as Ben was saying, it goes into a lot of different areas too. It's not just in Oregon; it's in many different states.
Yeah. So I have here an article, John, that talks about how. I mean, just the title, right? 31 states face revenue shortfalls for the 2017 fiscal year, and it goes through all the different states, and then it goes on to say that every state has a budget deficit. So it's just interesting when you start thinking about how broad this problem is, and really brings it to home, because I think there's so many people that are counting on the pension, and the crisis that's ahead of us is astronomical. They're multiplying it into the trillions.
When I'm talking to someone about their pension, we talked a little bit about the details of it, Ben. One of the questions I'll be asking them, or one of the two questions I'll ask them is, tell me about your pension and how much you expect from that pension. So they'll usually have, maybe it's an average of the last 3 years that they're working, and they might get 80% of that. But typically when I ask people this important question, do you have what is called a COLA, a cost of living adjustment on there? Many people don't have that COLA. And that's one of the things you were talking about was inflationary pressures that happen. So if you have $1,000 today, that $1,000 is only going to buy $700 of goods and services in the future.
Yeah.
So that's one issue if you don't have a COLA. But on top of that, let's say that you don't have a COLA, you don't have that cost of living adjustment, and also your pension gets slashed later on, and you're only getting maybe 70% of your pension. That's a big cut in your lifestyle going forward.
Some of the numbers of what has gone up here in Oregon is $885 million in the next 2-year budget. And that's just the pension costs. And that's more than 10% than previously forecasted, and 44% more than the current 2-year cycle. Okay? So we've already got this deficit that we're running up. I mean, this is really, to me, it seems like a lot of consumer credit debt. You know what I mean? Like once that starts to roll, once that snowball effect starts to happen, then it's so hard to get out in front of that and curb and go the other direction. And what has happened is, to me, in what this article I think illustrates well, is that there's a mindset around the problem here, saying, well, we'll get to it later. And it's so easy for, I think, for politicians to kind of just placate, their constituents and say, this is, and even though this is a huge problem, and it's right in front of us, staring at us and screaming at us, saying we need to do something and we need to fix this, it's easier to kind of brush that off and say, well, in 2 years we'll get there. I really have, an election that's important in front of me now.
Right.
And nobody wants to talk, people will address it, and there's all sorts of articles about this, and there's all sorts of people saying things about this. But the fact is that when you have increasing costs, and you're not addressing those with either tax increases or, cutting programs is the other way that this, I mean, you have to budget, right? And any kind of a budget, something has to be taken out in order to balance a budget. When that isn't being done, then you just are perpetuating and just kind of sticking your head in the sand. And that's exactly what has happened here in Oregon with the numbers that we're seeing, and with the politicians. There's a lot of, well, let's ask the actuaries about this, right? Let's go take a look at the numbers again, folks. Maybe they've changed, right? Maybe we're actually